All right, welcome to week 4. Congratulations, we're halfway through the class. So we're hopefully making some progress on our development as far as our topic, as far as our research project. And I just want to take a moment to just encourage you through these, these final weeks. At this point, you should have a pretty good idea of the thesis that you want to defend or you want to argue, your point, the claim that you want to make. So remember, a thesis statement is an argument, it's a claim, it's something that you're defending, some type of position that you're taking. So it's all those things. Thesis statement is a position that you're taking on a given topic. So hopefully you have that thesis statement in the works. It's a working thesis statement. We're not looking for a refined, completed thesis statement at this point, but we at least want to have something on paper to work with and to refine to make better. Okay, so hopefully you're at that stage. If you're not at that stage, please email me with where you're at and let me know what you're having difficulty with, and hopefully we can kind of begin to put that working thesis statement together. Now, if you remember, a thesis statement is it comes in, has different parts to it. So there's the actual argument of it, the what, okay, and then there's typically a foreshadowing or a forecasting of what's going to come in the paper with some points included in that thesis statement, the why, if you will, or the because. I'm going to argue this because of A, B, and C. So we want to kind of go for a thesis statement like that. It's important to do that because it sets up the structure of how your research paper is going to develop. Okay, so rather than just saying I'm going to argue this, we say we're going to argue this because you're going to argue X because of A, B, and C. So be looking at that. Be looking at how you can look for at least three points that you can include in your thesis statement that can kind of give the reader a kind of an understanding of what's to come, kind of give them a map, so to speak, of what the actual paper is going to include. And what that will do also for you is that's going to help you develop an outline, because that A, B, and C, those 3 points, are typically going to be specific points of support for that thesis, and you should typically be able to break down that A, B, and C into some subpoints. Okay, so point A would have A.1, A.2, A.3. Point B would have B.1, point 2, point 3, and so forth. So you want to kind of be thinking in those terms of how you want to structure and how you want to put together your paper, and it will be based on how you structure your thesis statement. Okay, so what you include in your thesis statement will likely end up becoming those higher points, those higher level points of what you will use to support your thesis. If you need any clarification on that, please let me know. Please, let me know. Hey, I'm having a little trouble on. I can get what I want to argue, but I'm not sure about what kind of points. Those points are going to come from your research. Those points are going to come from your sources. It may not be direct information from the sources, but in principle and concept, it will come from those sources. So it can be directly from, but it may not necessarily have to be. So you kind of have to be flexible in thinking like, okay, I've got this concept from source 1 and this concept from source 2, and they're somewhat similar, so you can kind of synthesize that together to make a point of what you want to argue. You may or may not feel comfortable doing that, but it's an option for you. It's just how you kind of adapt with your sources and kind of use that and assimilate the information to then turn around and put that through the writing process and put that on paper. And really, that's the struggle, that's the challenge in this process, is kind of knowing the subject you want to that you want to go into, researching that, taking what you've read, kind of thinking over that critically, and then taking your thoughts and then putting that down on paper. There's a lot of processing going on in that, so it's a challenge. So don't think this is something that just comes natural. For some people it might, but I think on average, for most people, it's a thinking process that has to take place. So just as much as you are reading, just as much as you're taking notes, just as much as you'll end up writing, all of that is really backed up with some solid critical thinking. And that takes time. So once you have your quotes and your sources of your source information, gathered, you're going to need to really think over that and really think, how does this fit? It's a puzzle. And you really kind of need to think how to fit that puzzle together into the actual paper. So seeing where one article kind of coincides and complements another article, how things really like line up together, you'll need to really begin to kind of think through that and begin to put those points together. And that will kind of help you in developing the points of your argument. Okay, so if you remember, based on the Essay Essentials, PowerPoint that I posted last week, we're going to be really referring to that a lot. So if you remember, the introduction gives a broad background. It introduces the topic to the reader. It narrows down to a thesis statement. It's a natural conclusion of that information. Therefore, in light of these things, therefore, as a result of this, one may argue that X is thus, and the reason why is because of A, B, and C. Okay, and then the thesis statement, as we go into the actual paragraphing to support that thesis statement, this is important to remember, each of your topic sentences should directly correlate, directly connect to the thesis. You should be able to draw a line straight from the thesis to that point. In fact, the whole paper should just be one vertical line from point to point to point. No deviations. No a point over here and a point over here and a point over here, and then you have to connect the dots. It's one vertical line graph, really, from thesis statement. Point 1 connects. Okay? It's the first point of support, first point of evidence. Second paragraph, or if you haven't continued the first paragraph with different subpoints onto another paragraph, that's fine. But typically, it can go something like this. First paragraph is your first point. You discuss your first point of support. You maybe provided some explanation of that point of support for your thesis statement. You provided a quote in support of that thesis statement. You provided some discussion, some analysis of that quote within that paragraph for that topic sentence, and then you conclude that point. Then you move on to your next point, into your next paragraph. You transition into your next paragraph onto the next point. The other way that can go is you've provided your first point in your first paragraph, or this could be any paragraph in the paper for that matter. You provided a point of support in the topic sentence of a paragraph. Then you've discussed it, you've maybe quoted some material, you've analyzed that material, you've concluded, but then you move on to a subpoint that's still within that main point. Okay, so it just depends on how you want to structure your points and subpoints. Now, just to make it clear, a point, it would be like if you reviewed a outline and you see the Roman numerals. Roman numerals, or main numbers, are the main points. Okay, that there's really nothing under you. Okay, so you see, let me explain this correctly. So you have 3 points. Those 3 points are completely separate from one another. They don't really blend together. It's point 1 is in isolation, of point 2 is in isolation, point 3 is in isolation. Now you can have subpoints within point 1 that kind of overlap a little bit, that are connected to point 1, but they don't necessarily connect to point 2. Okay, it kind of telescopes into one another. It kind of all connects into that one main point. Then you have point 2, which can have layers of subpoints under that as well. Point 3, layers of subpoints. So that's really what's going to make up the body of your essay or your paper. So you can have a paragraph that deals with a full point, and then you can have paragraphs, subparagraphs to deal with subpoints. It's just a matter of how you want to structure that. And I can't really give you an absolute template for that, because as I said in prior videos, that every writing situation is different. and you have to approach every writing situation in a unique way, just depending on the thesis, depending on the topic, depending on the research that's available. So everything really is kind of a grab bag of things. It's really just kind of in the moment of what's happening. So you can apply certain things from the writing process to every writing situation in terms of pre-writing, which is where we're at right now. That is your free writing, that is your outlining, that is your research, that is your brainstorming, that is your your critical thinking exercises that you want to utilize. That's all your pre-writing. So that's a principle that we can apply to all writing situations. And then there's the drafting, which is the actual writing of the thesis statement, which can be applied to every writing situation because we have to write it. Okay, otherwise it wouldn't be a writing assignment. And then we have the revising and editing stage. That's a principle that can be applied to every writing situation. But in terms of how you approach that is really depending upon, as I just said, the nature of the topic, the nature of what research is available, and how you want to strategize your approach. And there really is a strategy. And that can be laid out in the logic of your outline. So you really want to shoot for a vertically logical, point by point, as it says in Scripture, precept upon precept, line upon line, just as how Paul would teach in a sense. That's really what you want to shoot for is a very logically, vertically based, point by point structure as you would see an outline. Everything's connected. And what happens with that is, through that everything being connected, is that you have a cohesive paper that doesn't digress, that doesn't go off into some other subject or some other topic. And you can really keep a handle on the progression and the logic of the paper. Okay, so that's why I stress with the outlines that you'll be doing in this particular section. You're looking for something very vertical, something very logical, something point by point that builds layers one on top of the other. And it's a top to bottom layering. And it seems kind of strange, but we put the top one on, and we put the next one on, then the next one, then the next one, the next one, the next one. Okay. We always think of everything being like a stack of pancakes from the bottom up, but really with writing, it's from the top down. The introduction is first, thesis statement, and then everything down. Now, some people want to approach it where they'll write their introduction and their thesis statement and then their conclusion first, because really the thesis statement and the conclusion should mirror one another. They should be not identical, but nearly the same. The introduction and thesis statement sets up what's going to come in the paper, and then the conclusion kind of wraps up and says, hey, this is what I've talked about. It sums up the points and then emphasizes how the thesis statement is supported by those points. So they reflect one another. So when you write your paper, you should be able to read the thesis statement, the introduction and thesis statement, and the conclusion, and they should basically say the same thing. If they are different, then you've deviated in your process. So that may be an option for you. You can write thesis and introduction first, then conclusion, and then go in and write your body paragraphs. That's an option for you. It's however you want to strategize that. Okay, so just remember your outlining is going to follow a point-by-point vertical structure. You're taking your main points first. So you have, say, a minimum of 3 points, and then you fill in the gaps with any subpoints that you see that are additional supportive material to those points. I know I keep saying point, but the point is that your points are the main. So it's the main method of supporting your thesis statement. Okay, that's the evidence. Okay, and I can't emphasize that more. It's very easy to get confused. It's like, how do I support this thesis? How do I use my sources to support my thesis statement? Well, that's because you want to draw out your main points from your sources and support those sources. Support those points with your sources and with any quotes. And then this is kind of just a side note here. You may consider using an Excel spreadsheet for your sources to begin to cut and paste, or even type in, if you have to, Using if you're familiar with Excel, it works really well. You can use the tabs in the Excel sheet for your different sources, and you can use the cells themselves. You can format it however you like, and just cut and paste right in your quotes that you're going to be using, and that way you have a database really of your sources, and you can just go in and cut and paste from your spreadsheet database right into your paper. That's an option. If you're interested in doing that, if you want more information, email me and I'll kind of explain it to you. It may not apply to everybody. It just depends on what style or what works for you, what you want to try. If you're not an Excel person, you could probably do it on a Word document. If you don't use Word, you could probably use Pages. Or it's just a running Word document of your sources. They're noted in bold, and then you have all of your quotations uh, running below that. It's just a running list of quotations that would include, say, your works cited entry to begin that, saying it's this source with this works cited entry, and then all of these quotes coming below that are all for that particular source. So that may be a way. You want to think of some organization strategy for your sources and for how you want to be able to access them, because the most inconvenient way to do this is to leave your sources on paper in their published form. Say in a database, you have to go back and then type in. You have your source, and then you're having to type in quoting it while you're writing it. You don't want to do that. You want to try to avoid, or if you've handwritten it, then you're having to type from something you've already handwritten. So I would avoid that. I would keep your sources in an electronic form where it's cut and pasteable, to where you can just cut and paste right into your essay, and then it saves that much more time. So just to kind of come back into the outline format, you can even, I wouldn't go this far, but you can maybe kind of just note maybe where you might put some of your source material in your outline. That's up to you. You can really approach this as much in depth as you want. Right now, you can just follow the prompt if you like, and just work from that later to kind of kind of put more structure to your paper. You want to do at least the minimum of the assignment, I would say, at a bare minimum. But you can go beyond that if you want to add more. If you want to do more work with the outline, it may or may not help you. And keep in mind, an outline is a working outline, so it's up to you how much you want to invest beyond the assignment. It can benefit you, but it may not. It just depends on what you might choose to change. So sometimes we can invest a lot into an outline and then realize, oh wait, I want to completely flip this around and completely try something different. So for its outline, it's really up to you. Whatever you think is going to be best for you, whatever's going to work best for your paper and your project. But again, you want to do at least what's been required for the assignment. Anything less than that, unfortunately, would suffer in its grade. And yeah, we don't want to do less than what we're expected to do for the paper, I mean, for the assignment. Okay, but you can always do more for yourself. Okay, but anyway, so that pretty much concludes our look at outlining. In the next video, we'll talk about briefly about research questions. Okay, well that concludes this video, and thank you for watching. Have a great day, and God bless you on your writing project. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, thank you.